Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to our 8th Chamber City County Connects You teleconference. My name is Tara Doyle-Enneking. I'm the President and CEO of the Puyallup Sumner Chamber of Commerce. With today's teleconference, we turn our focus to science. Science will very likely be the hero in this tragic COVID-19 pandemic story. And right here in Pierce County, one nonprofit life science innovation hub called RAIN Incubator is making national news with its development of an antibody and wastewater sewage testing early warning system. We will be joined by RAIN founder David Hirschberg, PhD, neuroimmunologist, with extensive experience developing technologies that can rapidly identify emerging pathogens. Pre-COVID-19, Dr. Hirschberg worked at both Stanford and Columbia universities and was part of the early response in developing solutions to the SARS and MERS epidemics. Dr. Hirschberg will be joined by Tenley Cederstrand, a RAIN Incubator board director, active in grants and funding and supply chain oversight. Next, we will hear Ben Streifel, a Johns Hopkins PhD and first scientist at Exponent. Exponent is a leader in reopening strategies for supply chain management. We'll look at coronavirus and the manufacturing environment with a mindful eye on the biological considerations such as food spoilage, product quality, packaging operations, among other things. Our format today will be as follows. We will hear from each of our panelists, and then we'll check in with our local leaders for any relevant updates, at which time we will open it up to questions for the panelists and our city, county, and state officials. Your questions can be directed to the chat feature or with an email to admin@puyallupsumnerchamber.com, or feel free to utilize the hand-raising feature on Zoom if you would like to verbally ask your question. Laurie and I will do our best to capture your questions. So let's begin with RAIN founder, Dr. David Hirschberg, and RAIN board director, Benjamin Streifel. Great to both have you here. David, can you share with us your vision for RAIN and its impact on Pierce County?
Yeah, so RAIN's been kind of operating for a little bit over 3 years. It took us about 6 months to really get the place cleaned out. We're in the old Nativity House, which was set up as a men's homeless shelter. So RAIN was really set up to do blue-collar biotech. Our goal is really to train people. A lot of the technologies that are available, whether you're brewing beer or doing sewage treatment or making medical products or starting a biotech company, are really not available to a lot of the students here. You really have to become involved in it early and start working in laboratories and doing things with your hands to build your skill sets up. And so that was our purpose, not to to kind of add to a lot of the talent that's already in the area, a lot of the resources we have. So we have hospitals, but they're not teaching hospitals in the same way that you would get at Harborview in terms of research. And so we supply that kind of hands-on training and getting people ready. And so the output of this should be kind of a critical mass of talented young students. Many of them will go and start companies, hopefully close to us. And then we should also be able to attract more biotech to the area. And this is a similar model that happened in South Lake Union about 35 to 40 years ago. So we just want to recreate it down here.
Great. You were recently given permission to test samples of raw sludge at Tacoma's Central Wastewater Treatment Plant for the virus. You reported to KUOW that there's coronavirus in our sewers, and that might be a good thing. Can you tell us more about the early warning system you're developing in this unique environment?
Yes, so we're testing not only in Tacoma, we're at Pierce County, we're testing Gig Harbor and a lot of the smaller city-owned kind of sewage. So this is really nothing new. People have tested in sewage for a long time to look for polio and other diseases. These are molecular signatures. They're present in very, very low amounts. But what they can do when you don't have a good way to test individual people, like for instance, a lack of testing kits, or you don't know where in an environment it is, one of the ways that scientists do this is they go look in the environment in non-human samples. And so sewage is a very easily accessible. And many times we'll look in reservoir hosts, for instance, bats, or go into caves. And so this is just one of the many tools that we use to do this. The reason why it's so useful is it's really an early warning system. Is the one thing you don't want is to be measuring a disease by the number of people coming into your emergency room or the bodies going out the back. And so we want to do early warnings. So this is, in a sense, it's like a smoke alarm or a check engine light that goes off, and it tells you that you should be paying attention to something. And then from there, we can go on and maybe check in other areas or now start surveying people.
Great. How quickly does that test sort of cycle take place?
You mean in terms of how fast is it when we take a measurement? We can get a measurement in about an hour and a half. So the technology is very similar in principle to what you're being tested when you go in and ask for a COVID-19 virus test. That technology is very simple. It uses a molecular recognition and there's an amplification.
Great. So Tenley, what about the antibody testing, and what advice do you have for employers?
Well, the original thought was that if we could widely screen for antibodies, we could determine community-wide who would appropriately be available to go back to work. That if we had really good antibody testing, that then you would know who had prior immunity, assume that they couldn't get sick or reinfect other people, and that would really be helpful information in understanding who could be either a first responder and treat people with COVID-19 or also go back to work and kind of restart the economy. And there's been, unfortunately, some major problems with the idea of antibody testing. One is just available test kits. There's a huge supply shortage on the test kits. Abbott's prediction, which is the current test that people are using, is from Abbott Labs, and their current supply is looking at to be able to produce at max capacity about 20 million tests by the end of June. And 20 million tests, as we know, doesn't really move the needle for the number of people that need to be tested, for one. But for two, we are finding some of the tests to be problematic in their accuracy and ability to actually determine whether people do have antibodies. So one of the things that RAIN has started to address is to do third-party validation on some of these antibody tests so that we, first of all, know that they're accurate. So if we, let's say, detect virus in the sewage, we can then talk to that community sector or business sector. We can identify using really solid, strong antibody tests who has prior immunity and is potentially safe. So we're kind of looking at it as a two-pronged system. One would be an early warning system with the sewage testing, and then secondarily that we would do validation of the antibody tests so that we would know that we had really strong science and really strong results and we could rely on the antibody tests, but more importantly, that employers could rely on the antibody tests to know that their employees are safe to go back to work and can feel confident while they're at work. I'm saying that with a broad scope because there are definitely issues with not truly understanding how long the antibodies are staying active and at high levels in people, and that's something that the scientists will kind of let us know. But for now, what our focus is that we're looking at the security of supply with antibody testing, and then how effectively those antibody tests actually give us information that we can find useful as employers and as an economy in general.
Great. And Tenley, how did you become involved with RAIN?
My background in work is in the scientific industry. I was in sales and marketing and supply chain management, originally for scientific supply companies, and then focusing on environmental testing labs, and then eventually in the life science sector. Like David, I was kind of in South Lake Union early days, and I see a lot of similarities between what Tacoma is doing and what the early biotech in South Lake Union looked like. And then I'm also really passionate about the growth of business in Tacoma and Pierce County. And my husband and I have been dedicated and believe in the area and just feel like it's a gem of a place. And so I got involved with RAIN to try to help develop companies and develop students and provide access to scientific education, and then more importantly to scientific mentors, so that as they go off to university, that they feel that they've got a place when they come, when they return, and they've got a job potentially that RAIN has helped develop.
Great. David, tell us your vision for RAIN as an economic engine for Pierce County outside of COVID.
When we're not doing COVID. Yeah, so we're a lot about fundamental tools. So really giving people fundamental tools. So working on the nucleic acid, protein levels. These were really the, doing things like biosensor testing. So if what we're doing essentially when we look at an antibody test or we look in the sewage is really give information. It's in a sense, it's a biosensor we're asking for, that you can do a test. And can you tell us if something's there or not? And these kind of tests are done in the medical community. They're done in big factories where organisms are used to do good things like make beer or wine. And so you're constantly monitoring. And so we just wanted to give the students fundamental technologies that we learned in biotech, so that at a minimum, somebody should be able to be, if they're trained here at RAIN, whether they're in college or high school, or they're coming from a technical school, they would have enough skills to go work in a hospital lab or go work in a biotech company. And in addition, we're very entrepreneurial here. So we're providing a space where companies can form. And so we have 6 companies here. So when we're not focused on COVID, actually to pivot to COVID is very easy, because I was working on a project where I was looking at respiratory diseases in horses, and many of those are RNA viruses. I've worked on COVID, I've worked on SARS previously, and other infectious disease. So many of the skills that we train, assay development, how do you make a test that tells you something's positive or negative? How do you evaluate somebody else's work? Those skills immediately can be pivoted towards COVID-19. So once this is over, we'll pivot back to cancer products, making proteins, and building companies like we were before.
Great. And so I know the conversations have started at the county level too. I think all in this area are recognizing the asset you're bringing to this area. Can you tell a little bit more about how you sort of envision being able to scale this up, and also maybe into our communities of Puyallup, what that could look like as far as your early warning detection system?
Yeah, so basically in terms of what we've demonstrated is that we are a laboratory resource in Pierce County, and we were able to stay open when a lot of places, including universities, had to close down. And so I feel that we would be a great asset to help the state lab if we had a county lab here that could do basic testing, not just food poisoning, but really all the basic biological testing that you need. We can support places like Urban Waters, which primarily have been focused on chemical analysis, and we would layer in a biological analysis. Excuse me. So in non-emergency times, we would provide training for a lot of the students that go to hospital labs. We've also very interested in forensics, and so we have a lot of cases that are waiting to be processed with, we do high throughput sequencing here. And so we would love to do the training and provide and staff out a local lab that could do a lot of the drug testing and a lot of the forensics testings that are currently backlogged in this area.
Yeah, and I think in the area of the early warning system, I think the vision is that right now we have proof of concept. We've got a really accurate test. We're able to process a sample in a way that we get a really good signal if there's viral fragments in the sewage. But what I think we envision with the early warning system is that we know where the virus sits today. We know that it's going to wane down, and then there's going to be a second surge. And I think our vision is that we would then implement this early warning system, so we would be detecting the second surge earlier, so that we could really direct our efforts, our community health efforts towards isolating the most vulnerable, to really understanding where the virus is shedding early, so that we can really work in in sectors rather than a broad swath of the community, we really want to minimize the economic impact, the second economic impact that could potentially happen with a surge that then coincides with the flu season in the fall. So we really see this as, if we can put some consistent monitoring in place in sewage treatment or even commercial wastewater systems, that then what we can do is say, okay, we're seeing a spike in virus, and let's do some investigating in that area where we see the spike in virus. Let's go up chain and identify where it's coming from before it infects a larger number of people. So we see it as, the way we've been describing it a little bit is that when you have the virus, you're on fire. And if you can have an early warning system, that's really a smoke detector. And then you can say, is it just that you've been burning something in the kitchen, or is your house on fire? And you can kind of, do very intentional work to protect people in advance of it becoming a widespread disease. So that's how we see it, and we're capable and ready today to start that. What we need to do is get buy-in from local municipalities, potentially start to contract with companies, large companies that have campuses, so we can look at kind of large sections of people at one time. And we also need to scale up. So one of the things that I've been working on with RAIN is to try to reach out to Pierce County for one, and to other large funders to really get our project underway in earnest, with some real financial backing. So that's kind of where we're sitting now. We've really got a great defined test. We've got a plan. Now we have to kind of scale it up and get it implemented with community health organizations. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, that actually helps. My question was, what would we need to do to scale up for the Puyallup and Sumner communities? You've got a number of city elected officials, county elected officials, many stakeholders on this call. And so I wanted to make sure I would ask that on their behalf. Yeah. So again, fascinating work, and I'm sure the group will have their own questions of you. So I think for right now, we'll pivot over to Ben Streifel. Last week, we presented a useful toolkit for businesses to serve as a foundation for them to customize a tailored reopening plan for their company or organization. Fundamentally, it checks a lot of boxes for employers to consider. That being said, when you look at the complexities behind manufacturing and distribution facilities, there are far more considerations to be made. Today, Exponent first scientist Ben Streifel is here to talk about the supply chain management strategies their companies developed to assist manufacturing companies with their safe reopening. Ben, welcome. And can you first tell us a little bit about your background and how you landed at Exponent?
Sure. So I was raised in Puyallup, first and most importantly. Worked in Sumner a little bit. Went to high school in Tacoma, and then I went to college in San Diego, and I got my PhD in chemistry at Johns Hopkins. And so I currently live in Maryland. And Exponent is a consulting company for science and engineering problems across a wide number of industries. We have 900 or so consultants across food safety and regulatory in various areas. Lots of mechanical engineering. I'm a materials chemist, so I deal with a lot of chemical and thermal and mechanical testing of materials and figuring out why products fail, exposure to certain chemicals and things like that. So Exponent is putting together a sort of more detailed set of responses for various companies that have issues with opening to the public for a retail location or a healthcare setting, or manufacturers looking to disinfect products with materials that will not negatively affect what they're putting out on the market. So we have a lot of chemists and physicists and public health experts ready to go and help you guys figure out how to safely reopen, how to mitigate some risk, and get things running smoothly again, hopefully.
What is your specific role there as a first scientist?
So I do a lot of laboratory testing. We have a lab here in Maryland. We have laboratory facilities throughout the country and in other countries as well. So that helps us work around or with business activity restrictions. So we can accomplish testing of plastics is mostly what I do, but we can do chemical testing and some biological testing. Probably not as much as RAIN Incubator, but a little bit. So I handle a lot of materials failures from various industries day to day.
And so again, kind of going back to that pre-COVID, post-COVID question, what types of work was Exponent doing prior? The pivot seems very natural. And then I want you to talk a little bit about that pivot and some maybe helpful insights or strategies that you're putting forth to the manufacturing distribution facilities.
Sure. So to use manufacturing as an example, we deal with a lot of failed parts. So an injection molder, a packaging company, food packaging seems to be popular. All of a sudden we'll see some failures, and the client will approach us and we'll do the testing and use our expertise to figure out, why is this failing? What can be done? Can you change materials to get a better property? And now, pivoting to COVID, we're seeing a lot of anxiety around opening back up with, stocks of materials that have been sitting for 2 months, or restarting manufacturing lines, firing back up injection molding equipment, packaging equipment, and all of that, and getting the same results so you can put out the same product that you have been in the same quantity you have previously. So pretty easy pivot as well, certainly within our wheelhouse. Something newer is PPE, sanitizing that is popular. There's a free webinar on the website about risk management with PPE, mostly in terms of healthcare, but I think it would be really relevant to retail businesses or any business with lots of people on site, and how difficult it is to control that. So that deals with sanitizing surfaces and all of that stuff.
Great. And so are you being funded by businesses that are contracting with you? Are there grants that you're working with to assist businesses during that time? What role kind of are you playing to be able to help?
Sure. So we do individual retentions with businesses frequently. That's probably our most common thing. We do have some government organizations contracting with us. As an example, one of my clients is the Public Defender's Office for the state of Maryland. So I work with them on lots of chemical testing issues. As far as COVID goes, we're working with public and private hospitals, really trying to get their procedures to be scientifically validated and safe for everybody.
Great. You mentioned working in Sumner. I'm only going to mention this to some of my folks at Sumner who will appreciate this, and any moms out there who might have you want to let everybody know what you did in Sumner, where you worked?
I worked at the Shell station in the subway. I mowed the lawns, crawled my way up the ladder to making sandwiches as a sandwich artist, now retired, and moved on from there. So that funded my college housing. So that worked out pretty well.
That worked out pretty well, I'd say. Absolutely. Great. Well, thank you. There very well maybe questions from our listeners. I want to do a quick check-in with county, city, state. I know Betty Capistani and Gary Westcott just had to step out for a loan signing. So I'll speak a little on their behalf. She had reported to the task force committee this morning, just that there are a lot of folks reaching out to them and a lot of ideas they already have kind of in motion. Several committees and task force they're bringing together, whether it's the cities together, industries together, chambers together. So loves all of what we're trying to do in our community to pull together and have some of our own solutions, but also is telling me, in a sense, rest assured, there are some plans that she would, love to roll out. And I say she, Pierce County, will be looking forward to working with our groups and may have some more definitive, I guess, actionable items for us that they'll be able to support us on. So more on that next week. Again, I think it's timely. I don't know that I'm going to get them to say anything personally because they had to just step out. She'll let me know if they're able to pop back in. So let's see, Meredith Neal, I see you are on the call from the city of Puyallup, and also Councilwoman Cindy Jacobson. So if either of you have an update, we'd love to hear it.
Hey, Tara, this is Meredith. Can you hear me?
I sure can.
Great. So Meredith Neal, I am the Economic Development Manager for the City of Puyallup. I'll just give a really quick update since it feels like I keep on giving the same ones, but things are so constantly changing. So let's see, a couple of things that we're working on right now. We are looking at, we have a team that we've assembled that's an economic recovery team that is made up of a number of different departments within the city. And we are looking at different policies and administrative changes that we can do both in the short term and the long term to support businesses. So some of the things that we're looking at right now, we're talking about what sort of things we can change to allow businesses to potentially set up tables either on sidewalks or in their parking areas. And we're also tossing around the idea of maybe allowing some parklets as a pilot program so that businesses can reopen and still have social spacing requirements that would be required. Specifically, we have a lot of really small restaurants who, with the spacing requirements, might only be able to have 1 or 2 tables, and that's not financially viable for them to reopen for table service. So other things that we're looking at are around things like sign codes, if we can relax them, maybe waive some of the permit fees so if people want to put up temporary signing, and other things along those lines. We're also looking at longer term initiatives. So one of the things that I'm kind of excited about right now is that we've been talking with the University of Washington Tacoma campus, their Center for Business Analytics. We've been talking about using one of their student teams that's a Master's of Science in Business Analytics, and they're going to be starting in June, and having them work with us through the next year on taking a look at different business sectors and how they've fared through this, and looking through sales tax revenues for which ones were more resilient and which ones were less resilient, and what we can extrapolate from that for resiliency in our local businesses, and what we can do to help train some of our businesses that maybe weren't quite as resilient. And also what we need to do as a city in the future as we attract new businesses here to have a more resilient community overall. So those are a few of the things we're working on, and I will see if Councilmember Jacobson has anything.
Not much. Again, we're waiving impact fees if we can until the certificate of occupancy is issued, except for some of the stormwater ones we can't. And we're looking at the school district also waiving impact fees until the certificate of occupancy is issued, but that would be up to them. Permit extensions. And I just want to thank the chamber. This is, you guys that presented, you have such interesting work, like, wow, biotech in Tacoma. Maybe my kids won't all have to be moving away all the time if we get some down here. So thanks for all you do. You have great jobs. Love it. Thank you.
She's also a math professor at Pierce College, so has that right side brain going.
Just pre-college, and they just let me, sort of hang out there because it's cool. Anyway, thanks.
Send your students our way. We do have remote Python coding classes every other Sunday, I believe. Yeah. So get in touch with us.
I will. So is there, what are the costs on that?
Dave, I think they're free, aren't they? I think
they're free. Yeah. It's something we provide to the community. Our education director gives.
We also have a Girls Who Code session. Well, right now we're not having them, but normally we have Girls Who Code every Wednesday night. So we are available to be, our main, our mission is to grow companies, but really that part of that is to educate students in science, math, and tech jobs to bring tech jobs to Tacoma. So we have Superheroes of Science. We have lectures every month. We've got a bioengineering camp every summer. We have Girls Who Code. We do Python coding. There's lots of things outside of COVID that really do help foster STEM education and STEM education advancement in our whole area. And it's free to high school students, but also we work closely with TCC. We work with Bates Technical. We are open to the public in helping foster careers in science and technology.
Yeah, thank you. I'll email you because maybe Pierce can hype this. My dean could hype this to the natural sciences department. That's so cool. And I'm the parent of 3 girls who code, and they're software engineers. So very cool. Thank you.
Good.
Excellent. And we've got
I just want to say that, when this happened, there were a lot of past RAIN graduates who had worked here. Many had graduated and gone to college, or they were in the area, and they just happened to be here because everybody was here for the end of the last quarter. And many of them are in our labs right now working because they were our trusted hands. We knew how they could do it. They've now got 2-3 years experience at university. I had a graduate student who was back here. And so we have 11 people working in our labs right now on these assays and doing the work. And many of them are students. We even have one high school student who's homeschooled, who's in the lab doing the work.
And Cindy, if your daughters out working, if they're out in the coding world, we always can use mentors for the girls who code. So when we get back up and running, let's get in touch about that because we could really use their help.
Yep.
Yep. We've got some great space in Puyallup also out where our Centeris data center is, that if there's an expansion ever in your future or to set up these female coders, we've got space. We've got space, and we'll roll out the red carpet for you.
We'd like to bring down manufacturing from Seattle. So, a lot of the biotech companies that we're doing work for, those manufacturing jobs, when you look at a company like Seattle Genetics, there's 2,000 companies. I work for Peter Center, it's the number 3 person. So being able to pull down the manufacturing, Pierce County's already just demonstrated that we can do manufacturing down here. We need to show them we can do high tech. And that's the big concern, is really what's the critical mass of talented people. And, Pierce College, I would love to get a certificate program set up with Pierce College that we could do a biotechnology program and really start, giving the certificates, but really show that the students that graduate from these programs have the skill set. And that's what's going to bring companies down. Once they realize we have talent here, we could easily do that. We have companies incubating in our place right now. I brought a Canadian company down we do all their shipping. And that's what Pierce County can do. We've got Amazon down here. We've got these facilities, and it's just understanding how these biological products are a little slightly different. But at the end of the game, it's getting product to your customer. And so, and that's what we should be teaching our students from 7th grade.
Great. Well, I love that we've started this dialogue. I know even prior to this webinar teleconference, we talked about circling back and meeting next week. And I will make sure I have a few of these folks on that conversation, because there are a lot of resources out here, and we will want to leverage that and really make sure we can scale to our communities and help provide a nice pathway to do that with some of these folks. So let's see, I've got also County Councilwoman Pam Roach. I don't know if you have any updates today or anything you might want to ask of the panelists. I see a question. Go for it. Let's get you unmuted. Okay, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Okay. Wow, Pam Roach unmuted. That's going to be dangerous.
It's always a risk.
I just want to thank you for all that you're doing. I do want to point out that somewhere around the first part of July, the council is going to be looking again at the portion that will be left of the $159 million given to us by the federal government. And so you want to keep your eye on that. So we're going to be monitoring, hopefully closely, how the larger sum, about 60% of it, is being spent between now and the middle of July. And there might be some different percentages going here and there. We were able to get $1 million into our ag community because they've kind of been overlooked. And this is a very important issue for us. You know, if you have a bus coming from Mexico with people who yearly come up and work, and even one person on the bus tests positive, the whole bus is turned around. So the federal government is working to make sure that maybe workers in Florida who are done with the season can come up here, that sort of thing. The bottom line is we have to be very careful with some of our industries that are, and many of them are, it's not just the farming community. I mean, if you're, you know, Christmas time is a big time for everybody. And so I know that there's seasonal aspects to many businesses. In any event, we look forward to maybe having a little bit more. I'm very, very concerned that we have not opened up like I think we could be opening. I drive by Fred Meyer and go into Fred Meyer. Yes, I wear a mask, but the place doesn't seem to be slowing down at all. You can go into Costco. The parking lot is packed, as you all know. And yeah, you have to wait to go in. There's some distancing. It's not a long wait. So there, you know, Coastal, where you get your farm things. I mean, I go there and no problem getting in. So there has been some sort of a discrimination, I believe, for smaller businesses who don't even have but one person coming in every so often, hopefully through the day. So I think the community, the business community, needs to be stronger in its message to Governor Inslee. Yeah, one of the last letters I saw was actually coming out of Snohomish County, when I don't count them, but maybe 8 to 10 signatories on it. Several outlying mayors, couple, Sam Lowe, I know, Snohomish County Council member had signed it. But it's like 3 paragraphs. Thank you, Governor Inslee, you've done a great job. Well, yeah, fine. Say it in a sentence and then talk like you mean it. The next huge issue here is going to be our economy, and can we revive this in a way that we haven't ruined it for years? So I'm calling on the business community to take stronger messages to the governor and quit feeling like you have to come in bowing, because that's what some of these letters seem like. We need to take a stand, a strong one. I have noticed that the Republican Party has done that. Caleb Hamlick and J.T. Wilcox, representing the House minority, and Senator Mark Schessler, one of my former colleagues, who is because he's on the Eastern Washington, you might not know, he's the minority leader in the Senate, have taken strong stands about opening as we can. But if we don't do that, we're going to lose an awful lot. So when you're doing your thing, let's get strong messages to the governor right away, so that that he understands this is an emergency. Thank you so much for the time.
Excellent. Appreciate the vigor.
I got vigor.
Anyone? You got vigor. We like it. So City of Sumner, we have Ryan Windish on. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, Tara. I'm Ryan Windish. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Sumner. And I just want to thank you for bringing these folks to this conference today. The RAIN Incubator. I don't think I didn't know as much about RAIN as I feel like I should have, and it is super exciting. I've sat through meetings over the last couple of years talking about how do we bring, you know, more tech to the South Sound. How do we augment this area, set it up for success? And I am really excited to hear that RAIN is incubating and producing businesses and thinking big picture in terms of bringing businesses down from Seattle. It's not going on right now, but we've talked about going to King County every day for jobs. And in Sumner, I know we've been able to relocate some businesses from Seattle down. A lot of some manufacturing companies, some like Cummins Northwest, a diesel service and sales company, and others. And so we know that it can be done, and there's a huge benefit. But you, like David was saying, you have to have that core tech background and support workforce in order to do that. And as Tara was saying, Puyallup has places. Sumner can find places too for these biotech companies. Be great to continue to have that conversation. So that's exciting. I think looking kind of forward, big picture. The other thing that we've talked about over the last several weeks is kind of what does the new normal look like moving forward? What's going to change and what isn't, what's going to be different? One of the things I hope that we are able to keep rolling, maybe not quite to the intensity that we have right now, but I feel like right now the conversation and the partnership and the connection between government and business is really strong. And I'm meeting new people, I'm understanding new things, I'm seeing new connections, and I think that is powerful. And so as we move forward, I hope that we see each other as even more as partners in this. When Meredith talks about, the thinking, how do we get businesses like fairly fundamental things, like how do we get restaurants successful if they can only seat 50% in their dining space, just basic things like that. But the idea is we are solving problems. We are trying to figure out how to do this together. And I hope that continues. Kind of in line with that and continuing to work in partnership to try to get businesses reopened and thriving once again. I have been meeting with our business community in Sumner. We now have a subcommittee that's really focused on, we're calling it a coalition, because we want to include not just the downtown businesses, but as I've mentioned, the businesses in our industrial area. How do we engage them in this reopening effort and making sure they're getting what they need, the resources they need? I was excited to hear about Ben's toolkit and ways to make that happen. I'm real interested in hearing more about that. And then, so we are having those conversations, and then also our nonprofits, our faith-based community, our social services, those are all kind of part of this coalition for reopening Sumner. So anyhow, it's probably more than you want to hear, but we are trying to get organized here in Sumner, move forward kind of in a common effort and communicate that. Thank you, Tara.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, so Ben, kind of calling out Ryan and Ben, two of you are the two that we were going to be connecting next week along with some other folks. So we'll make sure that happens. They have our Manufacturing Industrial Center is in Sumner, as you know, Ben. All right, it looks like there's some questions. Laurie, have you been monitoring? We'd like to get some of these questions answered.
I have, and our panelists have been doing an excellent job answering them, so I appreciate that. So this is Hannah Thomas from New Canvas Advising is asking to Dr. Streifel, given your thesis related to conjugated polymers, and you indicated you are involved in advising clients who are restarting their businesses, especially manufacturing, and the impact on supplies that have sat unused brings to mind aerospace, especially Boeing, and the impact to them and ancillary businesses that work with Boeing. Have there been impacts observed to date? If so, what have been the recommendations?
Sure, I almost typed a response, so I'll just read that. So what we're currently seeing is most businesses are still restricted, and that has impacted the supply chain. So if a business is accustomed to purchasing and using a certain grade of polymer to make their parts or packaging or whatever they're doing, that has become less available in some instances. So they either need to source the same product from another manufacturer or pivot to an alternative material. And that comes with some real engineering challenges of, is it equivalent, and how do we tweak our process to use this new material? I suspect as we go along and the supply chain stabilizes, we probably won't have that issue as much any more than normal. But aging of materials is something we work with frequently. So a nylon, for example, may absorb water as it sits unused. And then when you go to mold it, you really don't get the properties you want. So I suspect we'll see a lot of that, and the sort of insurance and legal quabbles we see over bad product and who's at fault. So right now it's mostly supply chain related, but in the next few months through the rest of the year, I suspect we'll see product quality impacts from this dormant material. Maybe, who knows?
Great. I I'm noticing some comments back and forth, and I have to tell you, it makes me very proud. I know as a chamber, we try to be very much the champion for business, but we're also a convener and a connector. And so with all the great information that's coming from the panelists today, I'm happy to know that it's not going to just reside on a Zoom meeting, that I'm seeing relationships forming and connections being made, and already, you know, sort of promises to all work together, which is really exciting for us. And one of the main, you know, roles I think we like to play in this community. Were there other questions, Laurie? Oh, Brian had a question, it looks like, right?
Sorry, Tara, I was muted again. So, yeah, will antibody tests be something that wastewater treatment plant operators can do as part of their procedures, or is this something a third party would need to do?
So generally, we don't test, not generally, but antibodies are a test that's done with blood or some bodily fluid. We don't test for antibodies in sewage. We test for virus presence in sewage. Where the two lap over is you look at virus presence through kind of looking at a large section of the community, because all of the sewage comes into kind of a central area. And then you would kind of identify an area that had virus shedding in the wastewater. And then that would be followed up with antibody testing for who in that community might have already had the virus. You'd also test for virus using individual testing, but you'd be able to identify a section of an area to test rather than everybody. And where the antibody testing comes into play with getting people back to work, and the economic aspect is kind of identifying who in the community has tested for antibody presence and therefore would be immune and assumed to be able to go back to work. What we're talking about with our early warning system is, yes, wastewater treatment centers, we could train people to do the sampling, but the test requires a certain amount of equipment, and many of the wastewater treatment facilities have great scientists there, they've got great technicians, and if they were to have the instrumentation, we could absolutely train them to do the work and do the testing on their own. But as it stands right now, it does require a certain amount of scale up on behalf of the wastewater treatment plant. So yes, they could in theory do that, and actually a commercial entity that had a campus could also potentially screen their wastewater. But as it is right now, it does take a certain amount of the sample preparation and some work with the sample to give you a clear indication of whether there's virus. So the answer is yes, they can, but most likely not right today. But we can train them and we can help them.
If I could add to that too, that it's where I think RAIN could be very useful is doing population testing. So one of the things is we all want to each have kind of our own passport. When you have an antibody, you feel like you're safer, you're not going to get the disease. These are things we really don't know yet. And then we also know that even if you have antibodies, circulating antibody, if everybody around you is not vaccinated, this is the whole concept of herd health, you can still be overwhelmed by disease. And this is why our first responders, it's so important to have all this protective gear, even if they have antibodies, because you're really trying to get the viruses around you down. And so really this is a truly community operation, in the sense that we need to get the antibody levels of everybody in our community, whether the homeless population, the tribal population, your co-workers, your family, up to a certain level. And that's why this testing is important. We know that in our area, we have a certain level of circulating antibody. We could be testing every week. And then as that antibody level goes up, you could almost predict when it would be safe, or you could predict where there will be outbreaks. You know, what populations are most at risk. So this is why you're seeing this antibody testing on a greater scale in New York and in places that have already gone through this, because this is a way to predict if there is going to be a resurgent, and then immediately be able to identify where it could be or predict where it's going to be. And really through that and molecular testing, really, and caseworkers, really make this, make it a realistic proposition that we can all go back to work and go back our more normal lives.
Great. County Councilwoman Pam Roach, it looks like, do you have your hand up again?
No, I didn't. That must have been for the last time to see if my mic was on. Thank you, though.
Okay. All right. So panelists, again, great information. I'd certainly like to turn it back to you if there's anything else you'd like to say to the group or add that we may have missed. I'll give you that opportunity to do so.
Well, you're very kind. I just want to thank everybody. I've been so warmed, really, by the community that we're in. So many good people. And I just want to thank you all. I mean, this is a time to reflect on our communities and how strong they are and really caring and loving they are. And I'm honored to be able to represent such good people. Thank you.
Fantastic. Nice words. David and Tenley, anything from Rain you'd like to say in close?
No, I really appreciate the time and the consideration and the great questions, and feel free to reach out to either David or to me if you want to have a continued discussion, or if you'd like a tour of Rain, or you'd like to, not right now with a tour, but virtual tour. We'd love to have you down. We'd love to support the kids in school. And we'll get back to this. We'll get back to the work of developing companies in Tacoma. But for right now, we're solving this COVID-19 problem and really hoping to anticipate the next surge and really, help the economy from not having a second surge the way that the virus will. So we appreciate your time.
Great. We're grateful for yours. Thank you. And Ben.
Not much else in closing, but I believe I'll be putting together a presentation for next week. Tara and I talked about that, so we'll have a little more detail on what we can help you with and hopefully ways to move forward.
Fantastic. Well, this Zoom teleconference certainly will serve as the catalyst for many great things to happen in our communities. Thank you all so much for your participation as always. Panelists, again, just incredible information. Thanks for making us look so great. We appreciate you all. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.